Hello, Tamika.
Hi,
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And welcome to the Global Virtual Summit 2025, Tamika. And before starting the session, I want to introduce you to our audience, Tamika.
Okay.
Tamika is a transformative leader and currently serves as a Chief Operating Officer at the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors. With a strong background in project management, strategic planning, and process improvement, she has excelled in leading cross functional teams to successful outcomes. Tamika is also dedicated to mentoring emerging leaders and actively supports initiatives that empower others. She is a respected member of several professional organizations and serves on the board of the PMI Atlanta chapter. Her leadership and community commitment make her a standout figure in her field. That was a great bio, Tamika Smith, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Women Inspire and Win Conferences, for having me. I'm delighted to be joining virtually and spend a little time with each of you all. Now, at the 50,000 foot perspective, this presentation is a little about statistics and data and a lot about my lived experience in becoming very acquainted with the hidden cost of leadership, which I refer to as the unhealthy currency. Next slide, please. So I'm not seeing the slides advance. So I'll keep going. Today I'll talk a little bit about the true definition of leadership, what unhealthy currency is, while exploring some of the internal and external factors that can have significant impact on women in leadership in particular, and dissect how the concepts of growth and capacity building support leadership
Tamika,
theory.
hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to present your slide? Is there any presentation?
There was presentation.
Yeah, do you have any PDF or PPT presentations now?
Yes.
Okay, if you have, then please share that.
Let me see. My apologies, everybody.
Yes, Tamika, can we share from our end? Hello, am I audible, Tamika?
I am trying to share the slides.
Yeah, okay, okay. Please proceed. There is a share button next to the mic option. You can click there. Upward arrow button.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, no issues, Tamika. We will share from our end.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Please give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
Is Tamika?
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. I see the slides now. If you could advance the next slide.
Is Tamika? Please proceed with your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So today I'll talk a little bit about the true definition of leadership as I see it, what unhealthy currency is, and while exploring some of the internal and external factors that can have significant impact on women in leadership in particular, and dissect how the concept of growth and capacity building support leadership theory. And then we'll dive a little bit into how we approach our days with mindful intent. And if it's okay with you, as I move through these few slides, I will infuse some of my personal journey to provide context as we go along. So with that, let's get into it. Next slide, please. So who am I? My name is Tamika Smith, but who am I really? I'm a mother to 2 beautiful adult children and a grand dog named Domino. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. And then I'm these other things that you see listed here. I, like many presenters, used to introduce myself with all of the bullets that would outline my affiliations, education, and experience, all the things that would qualify me as an appropriate speaker for the conference and a thought leader on the topic. But on April 10th, that all changed for me when I, through my very impaired vision, looked at my daughter's silhouette as she asked me a question that in the moment was a sobering gut punch. And that question was, Mom, was it worth it? And I had to take inventory of my life and realize that I had never really asked myself that question. And so as I began to look through the pages of my career and my life, I realized that with each promotion, elevation, and new opportunity, I just took on the next challenge without hesitation. But I would most certainly take the next 6 days as I laid in the hospital bed with all sorts of procedures being done, IVs and monitors being connected to me, to ask myself that question. I took time for some deep self-reflection, naturally asking, why me? Why did this have to happen to me? Why did I have to go through this? And as the doctors were coming in and confirming what I had experienced, the news initially was very bleak and discouraging. And with each passing day, I was losing hope that I would ever be able to function in the way that I had for so much of my life. I'd lost some vision. My ability to articulate my words was impacted. And in my mind, life as I knew it was done. And I needed to figure out how I was going to cope with this new normal. So a couple of days after I was released from the hospital, I would make my way downstairs, come sit at my desk, turn on my computer and open my email, knowing that I really wouldn't be able to see anything, making out a word here or there. I would just close it all down in despair. Yes, I was falling back into the old patterns of pushing myself to extreme limits, which resulted in more frustrations. So a few days later, when I was more settled in at home, I sat at my desk and opened my computer again. And I saw an email, subject line said, "You're invited to speak." And it was an invitation to submit an abstract for this conference. And even though I was 99.9% sure that I was not going to join the conference because I was not even remotely able to leverage any of the skills and abilities that built my 30-year career. And my vision was completely blurred at best, but it was a little glimpse of hope and light. I'm not even sure why I held on to the possibility of participating here today, but I did. I held on to the possibility of realizing this very moment as if my life depended on it. And in some ways, I think it did, because my focus now shifted from what I couldn't do to how do I leverage what I still had the capacity to do, to build up my strength, to draft a framework, to tell a story. You see, my entire career in leadership has been focused on how can I be of service and how can I remove the barriers that impede my team members from being their very best. And I see this talk as being no different. So as the days passed and my sight began to improve in small increments, I started to believe that I would be well enough to give this talk. After all, I had about 2.5 months to see how much more I would improve. So when I agreed to submit an abstract, I was about 4 weeks into my recovery. My left eye's peripheral vision was what the doctors referred to as filled out. And that means there was a void. No vision was registering. And additionally, much of my vision field was significantly impacted. And I was still trying to comprehend the cognitive impact that I would still have to work through. But I said yes anyway. So when I was thinking about this talk initially, it was really hard for me because I knew I wanted to talk about leadership, but I wasn't certain what direction I would take the discussion in. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to share the details of my personal journey and to what extent I would share if I went that route. So I just began to type. I began typing what would ultimately be the abstract that I would submit for the conference, fumbling over the keyboard, trying to remember where the keys were located while my mind was going 100 miles per hour in different directions. And I was making all sorts of typing errors. Yet instead of getting frustrated, I just got quiet. And I began to meditate and center myself. And like a flashbang, it came flooding in. I wouldn't just tell a story, I would tell my story. But not from the vein of this is what happened to me, but more centered around what lessons did I learn from this experience? And what are some of the signs and signals that we're on the wrong track? And how do we course correct before it's too late? So when I made up in my mind that I would open up in that way, I discovered one thing about myself with complete certainty. And that is, I am willing to be the lesson to help others achieve their blessing. And that's why I'm here today, sharing my journey with you. So here's a little more context. A few years after the pandemic, my father was diagnosed with dementia. And I lived in fear that I too ultimately would face the reality of that diagnosis one day. So I developed a morning routine that I did no matter what, to exercise my brain before my feet would ever hit the floor. And that routine included affirmations to set my mental tone for the day, a series of strategic thinking puzzles to get my brain activated, and identifying the top 3 things I needed to accomplish for the day. It was sort of my attempt at a slow start to my morning to get my juices flowing. On average, I would complete each puzzle in under a minute. And well, when I was finally released from the hospital, I thought I would be able to just fall back into my daily routine. And boy, was I in for a real wake-up call. I opened the first puzzle and started trying to complete it. Well, I really couldn't see. And so the signals were not getting to my brain that would allow me to think strategically. So the time was ticking and my frustration was growing. Being completely frustrated, I would just close the apps. The next day, I would try again, no success. And my frustration, now with myself, for not paying attention to the signs and allowing myself to be in this situation, for not taking the necessary precautions to check in with myself, for not setting ruthless boundaries. It all grew more intense. And where I was supposed to be letting my body rest and heal, I was screaming on the inside. And while I looked to my family like I was resting peacefully, I was developing a great deal of rage. Unbeknownst to me, that rage was boiling and bubbling up to the surface. And it would eventually spill over like hot lava on the people I care about most in this world. I finally had to resign myself to understand that I had been sat down. Well, I like to say I was put in timeout. And in my heart of hearts, I believe it was so that I could learn, course correct, and share such that others would hear and avoid the latent pitfalls that oftentimes are embedded in leadership paths. So let's focus our attention now on the first point of this presentation, that is the idea of unhealthy currency. Next slide, please. So what is unhealthy currency? It's the collateral, tchotchkes, and trinkets, if you will, that we pick up along our career and life journeys and tuck deep inside ourselves as if we're dropping coins in a purse that have the possibility of building up or calcifying into what manifests outwardly as stress-related markers like imposter syndrome, avoidance, procrastination, overachievement, seeking validation, downplaying success, comparative behavior, and perfectionism, to name a few. But essentially, it's the compilation of feelings, emotions, and memories that trigger a trauma response from situations like lack of support, being micromanaged, aging parents, health concerns, budget concerns, navigating office politics, any of life's many uncertainties. But recognizing these outward manifestations quickly can help us to change course before we find ourselves in a code red situation like a health crisis. Next slide, please. So while, like I said at the top of the presentation, this is not a scientific thesis in any way, but I would like to share with you a few statistics that I found to be interesting as I was preparing for this discussion. So according to Grant Thornton's Women in Business report published in 2021, women held 29% of senior management roles globally. McKinsey & Company conducted a study in collaboration with leanin.org and found that women were significantly more likely to report being burned out than men. The American Heart Association's journal article entitled Occupational Stress and the Risk of Heart Disease in Women identifies that women in stressful jobs are at a 40% higher risk of developing heart disease. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute reports that 1 in 5 women has high levels of cholesterol. And finally, the World Health Organization reports that 45% of women over the age of 20 have hypertension. I'm sure I could go on and on with data point after data point that supports the theory that the enemy of our state is stress. And if we don't acknowledge stress is present and manage stressors the right way, it could have dire consequences. Now, these statistics didn't even specify race or ethnicity, where we know it to be true that certain populations of people can be predisposed to certain health risks more than others, which makes it even more imperative that we adopt healthy ways to manage stress on a consistent basis. Next slide, please. Shifting gears a little, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines leadership as the capacity to guide the actions of a person or group. So let's talk a little bit about growth versus capacity. When we think about growth, particularly in the workplace, what comes to mind is promotion, increased responsibilities, and elevated job titles, increased compensation, benefits, and recognition. Conversely, when we think about building capacity, remember Webster's definition of leadership is the capacity to guide the actions of a person or group. Building capacity focuses on enhancing one's own skills, knowledge, and competency to improve performance. I would surmise that building capacity is the internal work that strengthens your position based on expertise. Or at a more base level, it's what you get, whether through going back to school or getting another degree or obtaining a certification, while growth is what you give. And it is often quantified by time. But specifically, it's the sacrifices made in pursuit of elevation and increase. And that sacrifice could be time with your family, time with your friends, or time for yourself. I would offer that Webster's definition of leadership really is half of the true definition of leadership when you add the very real component of humanity, because leadership is never about self. Why would you choose to be a leader if not to help others? And if you all will indulge me here, my personal perspective of leadership is first that leadership is a choice. Now understanding that leadership is the way we choose to live as an example of action or intentionality, determination, excellence, and resolve, showing others how to ignite their passion and purpose. I think we can agree that as leaders, we move from a space of belief that we have the capacity to guide the actions of others. But I challenge you to self-assess and ask yourself these 4 questions. Next slide, please. The first question being, how are you leading? The second question, what example are you presenting as a destination or goal for those following you? Question 3, what tools are you equipping those under your leadership with? to successfully get them to the destination? And question 4, how are you modeling management of the accumulation of unhealthy currency collected through workplace demands, personal responsibilities, and societal pressures? And the importance of checking in with self. The interplay between environmental factors, agitators like stress, lifestyle habits, and genetics can result in an internal built environment where our bodies and minds are screaming for help, yet we can't hear it for all the noise. So finding practical ways to stop and smell the roses, if you will give us the moments where we can course correct as necessary to, before we get into a cold red situation that was completely avoidable. Next slide, please. So as I continue to prepare for this presentation, I wanted to understand a couple of different statistics. I wanted to know roughly how many self-help books have been published specifically targeted to women in leadership. There are approximately 2,000. 10 to 20% of them are focused on negotiation skills and stress management, 5 to 15% on personal branding, 15 to 30% on work-life balance, and 30 to 50% on career advancement. So you see, the idea of ambition and pursuit of greatness is designed to keep us trained on wanting more and driving ourselves to chase a moving target. I say moving target because when do we ever get to a point where we say, I have arrived at my destination and I don't want to go any further? Unless we're gearing up for retirement, most of us don't do that. But that's why we structure our lives around goal setting, proudly wearing the banner of being resilient, all while possibly neglecting the silent alarms of poor stress management and burnout, which can show up in our hesitation to take time off from work for fear of the work that will pile up and set us behind upon our return. This is not to say that ambition and drive is bad, but when it is not carefully managed and continually balanced and recalibrated, it can lead to that cold red situation. Next slide, please. So here are some practical ways that you can approach your days with mindful intent. Set an alarm to take mindfulness breaks. Step away from your desk. Close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Go for a walk. Engage in a quick 5-minute guided meditation. Where feasible, carry a notebook or journal of some kind so that you can practice journaling for reflection. This allows you to have a mechanism for release and prevents you from inadvertently collecting unhealthy currency. Remember to eat. Remember to step away from your desk while you eat, but finding meaningful ways to have clear separation of work from the rest of your existence, because it all starts, when it starts to overlap and combine, it becomes a recipe for disaster. And now these are not new concepts, but I want to bring us back to my perspective of what leadership means. It is not only about how we show up for ourselves, but it's also about how we show up for others, to give them a space as well as the grace to find their why by living their best lives through their passion and purpose. A title does not a leader make, but it is ultimately rooted in the impact that you have on each person in your presence. Ensuring that we are modeling the behaviors and commitment to live as the examples we want to see in the next generation of healthy, whole leaders who will take us into the future without carrying the burden of the unhealthy currency that can weigh us down. Next slide, please. So during the time that I was in the hospital going through my deep self-reflection, I thought about what I would tell my teenage self if I had the chance, who was so bright-eyed, ready to take on the world, and saw no limits. Now in that moment, I was not really exuding a great deal of self-love, as I have admitted, but when I started to acknowledge that I did the best that I knew how, the message came to me. I had parents who worked hard, who were hardworking individuals. Both of them, for most of my life, worked multiple jobs. So as I became an adult, I modeled what I saw. I spent a great deal of time away from my children, missed a ton of precious moments when they were littles, vowing to myself that I would make up for it when I made a better life for us, and that they would appreciate the sacrifices, or at minimum, they would respect them. But what I have come to now understand is those sacrifices were mine, not theirs. And the choices I made in pursuit of being great caused them pain. But most importantly, the wake-up call of April 10th illuminated for me the vision of seeing my adult children as littles again, putting their little feet in my footprints, following the model that I was patterning for them. So my message to this young woman is life is going to be hard, kid. And you're going to have some major wins and some monumental losses, but your faith will provide comfort for you in the darkest hours. Just know that you'll be okay. Take care of the fine moments that are just for you. Celebrate your wins, reflect on, but don't dwell on your losses, and always, always forgive yourself. So even if I had to stumble over every word of this presentation to deliver this message today, it is my charge to ensure that I am modeling a healthier way to move ambitiously in purpose and passion. I want to close out with a short story about a young girl who said to her father, "I'm tired. Life is hard. I want to give up." Her father, saying nothing, walked in the kitchen and boiled 3 pots of water. He placed a potato in one, an egg in another, and coffee beans in the third. He waited in silence for 20 minutes. No advice, just water and fire. He then placed the potato, egg, and coffee in 3 bowls. His daughter replied, "Potato, egg, coffee." The father responded, "The potato was once tough. It's weak now. The egg looked fragile. It's now hardened inside. The coffee beans didn't just survive. They transformed the water itself." So I will leave you with a question to ask yourself. When life boils you, will you weaken, harden, or bring about change? So let me reintroduce myself. My name is 𝐑𝐞𝐬 Smith. I'm a mother, daughter, sister, friend, and stroke in leadership. Thank you for your time today.
Yes, Tamika, yours is an inspiring journey, and you have a successful future. And thank you so much for your valuable time, Tamika. And
Thank
we
you.
have a few questions from our audience, Tamika.
Okay.
And I want to ask you one. How can leaders help others manage leadership pressure?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How can leaders help others manage leadership pressure?
Yeah, one of the things I think that is critically important for leaders in helping their team manage this unhealthy currency is really checking in with your team, building relationships with your team. One of the things that was very touching for me when I became ill, 90% of the staff in my office wrote handwritten notes, just explaining their appreciation for my leadership. And you hear people give you kudos and accolades, and you win all these awards that reflect leadership. But when people take their personal time to write a handwritten note, to express that to you, it really beats all of the accolades and awards that you can get. You to know that you've impacted someone's life, not only professionally but personally. And so I would say just building relationships with team and giving that safe space for team members to express that they're stressed out, and being willing as a leader to make adjustments to accommodate that stress. Because we can easily say work-life balance. We hear all the time work-life balance, but if we're really not committed to making those adjustments and pivoting to allow our teams to relax and process and take care of themselves and check in with themselves, then what are we really doing as leaders?
Thank you so much for your answer, Tamika. And don't worry about anything and be strong. And thank you so much for your valuable time. And
Thank
be on the backstage and please join the next session. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
you. Bye bye.